Okay, so as you can see in the title of my presentation, I'm going to be looking at the left periphery of the sentence from an experimental point of view, because I think this is something that has not been done, to my knowledge, has not been done to a large extent, and that is something that I wanted to look into. So in general terms, this dissertation is going to explore, or this project, sorry, is going to explore the process by which speakers adapt sentences to their discourse context. In more specific terms, I ask the following questions. So is one sentence type able to fulfill multiple discourse contexts? Second, is one discourse context being fulfilled, or can it be fulfilled by multiple sentence types? And lastly, is intonation correlated to context? These questions are relevant for linguistics, as previous models seems to disagree on the predicted answers. I'm not going to get too much into the previous literature, or I'm not going to get too much into the theoretical part for this presentation, but I wanted to give you just an introduction of why this is something worth looking into. So because of this situation with contradictory predictions, this project has two main goals. So one of them is to provide experimental evidence, which is the point I will be focusing on today. And the second part is to discuss the theoretical implications, which is something that we can discuss in the Q&A, but is not going to be the focus for the presentation. So in order to find answers to the research questions, we will be working with three sentence types. So starting with the canonical sentence, like the one I presented in example 1, then we have clitic-doubled left dislocation, or CLLD, which involves fronting of a constituent, a Pedro in this case, and its clitic doubling, lo in this case. Further, we have focus fronting, which involves a similar movement to the left, but we have clitic doubling. Just to give you a brief original idea, the example in 2, CLLD, is supposed to be a topic construction, while the number 3, focus fronting, is a contrasted focus construction. Now, the disagreement comes in some of the details, as we are going to see later, and also about the possible role of the canonical sentences in all this picture. So again, these are the three research questions that I will try to be answering. And as an introduction to the results, we're going to see that for the first research question, results show that CLLD is acceptable in multiple discourse contexts. Also, CLLD and the canonical counterparts are interchangeable. And lastly, intonation does correlate to discourse context. Overall, we will see that these results, again, do not follow from any of the prediction theories. We are going to be seeing three sources of evidence. However, the second and third studies were designed due to a number of limitations on the first one, due to a number of limitations on the corpus study. Therefore, for today, I will skip the corpus analysis. We can talk about it in the Q&A, but I will focus on the acceptability judgment task and on the scripted production task. So in the acceptability judgment task, there were 25 speakers of Spanish from Madrid, Spain, and they rated the acceptability of sentences in their discourse context. Namely, they were presented with sentences that included both fronted or non-fronted target constituents. So it was basically canonical sentences or CLLD, canonical sentences or CLLD. And these three, or these two rather, type of sentences were presented in three discourse contexts. So let's see some examples. So in the local condition, a target constituent such as a un chico is linked to a given referent such as those guys. So as in 4, what happened with those guys? They saw one of the guys downtown, but I don't know about the others. In the new condition, the target constituent, which is again un chico, is presented in a context with no antecedent. So what happened? They saw a guy downtown. Lastly, in the WH condition, the target constituent un chico answers a WH question. So who did they see in the park? They saw a guy around there, or they saw a guy in the park. So these are the results, and you can see the judgment results in the vertical axis and the three conditions in the horizontal axis. Within each condition, you can also see the canonical sentences in dark blue and CLLD in light blue. So I'm going to give you a brief description, and then I'm going to get into the statistical details. But if we trace a line in the midpoint of the scale, we see that both CLLD and canonicals are accepted in the local and new conditions, while in the WH condition, the canonical sentences are accepted while CLLD is rejected. So statistically speaking, what happens here is that CLLD is significantly more acceptable, or rather is significantly less acceptable in the WH condition in comparison to the other two conditions. And then in the two conditions where CLLD is acceptable, there are no significant differences between CLLD and the canonical version of the sentence. So in sum, both CLLD and canonical seem to be able to fulfill multiple discourse contexts. And the local and new contexts are fulfilled by multiple sentence types. So in principle, these findings seem to align with the discourse-free hypothesis, as you can see with the double check mark. However, note that CLLD was not accepted or not acceptable in the WH condition, and this indicates that the construction is not completely free from discourse restrictions. Therefore, yes, none of the three models truly predicts what our findings are here. So we're going to leave the AJT for now, and we're going to come back for it later in the discussion. So in the scripted production task, there were 22 speakers, again from Madrid, Spain, and they read sentences out loud. So 12 of the speakers were presented with fronted, basically with CLLD and focus fronting, and this was 12 participants in one of the sessions for the experiment, and then the other 12 speakers, they participated in the second session, in which they read only canonical sentences. We did this with the goal of not having the same participants reading both canonical sentence and non-canonical sentence, trying to avoid that one may affect the other in some unpredictable way. So all these sentences again were presented in three discursive conditions. So the first one is a contrastive focus condition in which the target constituent, which is Agueda in this case, contradicts a given antecedent. So in our example, if you are looking for Jose, he's not here today. And then in the answer, I'm looking for Agueda, not Jose. Now, for the contrastive topic condition, the target constituent, which is a Barbara in this case, is linked to an antecedent, those two. But note that it is linked only as part of a larger category. So, for example, in our example we have in the question, why are you looking at those two? Those two is the antecedent, and as you can see in the answer, we have two different references. I'm looking at Barbara's eyes and Antonio's big ears. Lastly, in the given topic condition, the target constituent is Agueda again, and is linked to an antecedent in a one-to-one relationship. So when do you see Agueda? I see Agueda on the weekends. Once the participants were recorded, I analyzed three aspects of the target constituent. First, I look at the pitch accent, which is this term refers to the outline of the intonational string in the tonic syllable. Second, I look at pitch range, or the distance between the lowest and the highest point in the intonational string. Lastly, I look at the right boundary of the constituent to see whether the end of the intonational string ends or ended in a high or a low boundary tone. So let's go with the results. First, the results for pitch accent showed no significant differences whatsoever. Second, contrastive focus showed low boundary tones, while both topic types showed high boundary tones. Lastly, contrastive focus also showed a significantly larger range than those of both topic types. But this was also this was only apparent in session 1. So as for the previous experiment, I'm simplifying, or I'm oversimplifying the findings here, but it's something that we can talk about in the Q&A. So going back to the literature, we see that the prediction that pitch accents mark different discourse conditions was not confirmed. And this actually aligns with other studies in Galician, in Greek. There has been done in other languages with the same non-significant results. However, the significant results for boundary tone and range, in which contrastive focus was on the one hand, and then all topic types were on the other hand, or were different from contrastive focus. This also aligns to previous studies. So going back to our research questions, we see partial positive answers to our 3 research questions. The acceptability study shows that one sentence type may fulfill multiple discourse contexts, and one discourse context might be fulfilled by multiple sentence types. However, CLLD is rejected in the WH condition, as we saw before, showing that the construction is not completely free from discourse. Discourse is there, present somehow. Therefore, the one predicting theory that may show something, or may seem to be predicting, making correct predictions, is actually not fully borne out. Also, in the production study, the results showed that intonation does correlate to discourse context. However, as we saw, this correlation is to range and boundary tone, but not to pitch accent. So this is also unlike predicted by some of the other models that we saw at the very beginning. So in sum, none of those previous models entirely predict the experimental picture. So in conclusion, this study explored the process that allowed speakers to adapt sentences to its discourse context, using the Spanish left periphery as a test case. Based on corpus, acceptability, and production evidence, I argue that CLLD, or left peripheral sentences, and canonical sentences are interchangeable in various discourse contexts. And also the phonology of contrastive focus is different than that of topics. So these results do not follow from any of the previous models. And going forward, I propose a morphological approach to discourse. We can talk about this again. We can talk about this in the Q&A. But what I mean by that is that if we analyze discourse or discourse features as simply morphemes that are added into the derivation of the sentence, then we have no problem explaining the free word order. That comes with its own set of problems, but again, this is something that we can now discuss in the Q&A. So finally, here you have my citations for your reference, and Thank you very much.